Hello, I'm Ryan McKee, Chief Content Officer over at Our Lads, and I am joined today with two of our luminaries from Our Lads. We've got Dave Sy at Our Lads _Sy for Twitter if you want to follow him. We need a nickname for you, Dave, because we've got a good nickname for Tucker that we will get into. But like, what are you thinking for a nickname for you?
Summer project. Let's center something around Sy, but let's try to keep me out of the fantasy limelight for now, because I did come in last place in 2 of my 3 leagues last year. So
all right,
we'll try to keep fantasy out of it.
We've got Dave on here for his recruit or his for his scouting knowledge, not necessarily for his fantasy knowledge. We've got Tucker on here for he's a fantasy king of sorts. He's a Duke of depth charts. Tucker Moss, he's our depth chart expert on Our Lads, knows all things depth chart. He's here to talk to us about some potential opportunities where there are holes in the depth chart where guys can step in and maybe fill a role. How's it going, Tucker?
I'm doing great. I'm excited to talk about this stuff.
Yeah, you seem really excited. That's exactly what I thought. Like, wow, Tucker, his voice raised a couple of decibels. He's ready to go.
Yeah, if you know me,
he's ready to go.
Extreme excitement.
Now,
excitement coming.
Is this considered insider trading? That Tucker has inside track at every depth chart in the NFL, and then that's why he's dominating all these depth chart leagues. I guess it goes to show it really does help to know everything what's going on.
Yeah,
that's absolutely true. I think this is an illegal stream because we have too much knowledge. The people who are tuning in are going to get some great insider fantasy football knowledge. Tucker's very locked in on all the depth charts. So we're just going to get to it. We're going to start with a little dynasty because that's the time of year. We just had the NFL draft. So you have to start thinking about rookies that you want to draft in your dynasty leagues. I'm going to throw out some rankings to these guys. They're going to see if they agree or not. Maybe we can come up with some Our Lads fantasy rankings as well at some point. But here we go. Any arguments with Caleb Williams as the #1 dynasty player you want to draft in your leagues right now? Dave?
You want me to go first?
Tucker?
I guess so. Yeah. I mean, I don't know.
You guess so, Tucker. Come on, we need definitive answers.
Is this like Superflex dynasty? You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I mean this could be either. This could be Superflex. This could be. Are you feeling like Marvin Harrison is the?
I prefer.
I got him second on my list.
Yeah, I mean, like if it's not a Superflex league, I prefer to do the like receivers or running backs, just because there's so many quarterbacks. So it depends how big your league is, I guess, for dynasty.
Obviously, it depends on your needs. I understand. Like if you don't have a quarterback, or you're looking for if you have an older quarterback, like say you're starting Kirk Cousins, and you don't know how long he's going to be around for, you might want to you might prioritize a Caleb Williams.
If you need a young guy, I would say just Caleb Williams or Jaden Daniels or McCarthy are all pretty up there. I would say I'd say all the 6 first rounders are pretty good, but I
don't know because I mean I guess it depends. Like Drake may not start this year,
right? Yeah,
we see that
they're all pretty good, like long term probably options, but for short term it's like Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, and then maybe McCarthy if he wins the job, which I feel like he will, but.
Yeah, I think he will too. But okay, so Dave, let's have you weigh in here. You had Jaden Daniels over Caleb Williams in your NFL draft rankings. How does that differ from fantasy, or does it?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question because if you ask me which quarterback am I going to take to start my football team in the NFL, I'm going to Jaden Daniels, and we talked that topic to death. And By no means is Caleb Williams considered a prospect a tier under Jaden Daniels. They were 1A, 1B. But when it comes to fantasy, you do need to look at supporting cast and just situation, right? And the Bears have done as good a job as anyone's ever done in terms of creating a system and support system around that quarterback for his rookie season. The offensive play caller, the system, it is known to be a little run heavy. They did bring in DeAndre Swift. So you have to start asking yourself, are they really going to let Caleb loose? Or after these failed projects they've had with Mitch Trubisky and Justin Fields, different regimes and coaching staffs, I know, but the ownership, the organization is probably really going to make them kind of tap the brakes a little bit and know that there is a lot Caleb needs to work on with his game to be a better pro. And I talked about this a lot, the 33 fumbles and 32 starts, the lack of care, the constant running backwards away from pressure. It works in the Pac-12. It will not work in the NFL. So there's a lot to work on with him. And they really don't want to screw this up long term. So if anything, I think they're going to have some training wheels on Caleb. And if we know anything about Cliff Kingsbury in Washington, I think he's going to let Jaden loose pretty early on in his career. And he's got a good supporting system as well. So early on, I believe Jaden Daniels is going to be a better fantasy option than Caleb Williams.
Because of the running.
Because of the running, and just I think the offensive system is going to be more like, hey, let's let it loose. Let's see what happens. And, Chicago, their defense that's another thing about playing quarterback as a fantasy quarterback. If your defense is very good and you're a lot of tight games, that actually can hinder the quarterback's ability to score a lot of points because you're not playing a lot of catch-up football in the second half, getting those what they call garbage points, right? So Jaden Daniels still, I think, leans in that direction too. His defense is worse. Thus, I think there's going to be more shootouts and opportunities for him to get some of those garbage points in second halves of games.
I would say I think that I feel like Caleb Williams will probably go for, like, people will draft him first, but
yeah,
I like
bigger name,
Daniels better for value though. Like it's just it could be argued, I guess, but like the running I feel is a big part for fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
Like the supporting cast is kind of the easy thing to see. Where his receivers are arguably one of the best on the Bears, but you still got Terry McLaurin, Jan Dotson, Luke McCaffrey, Zacchaeus on Washington, which they're not slouches or anything.
And in most leagues, correct me if I'm wrong, Tucker, but you probably know the scoring touchdowns for fantasy. Usually it's 6 points for a rushing touchdown, right?
Yeah,
and 4 for passing. So that could also break a tie too. There, like who's going to score more on the ground? If I had to guess between the two, it'd be Jaden.
Yeah, that's a big part too. Is like in the system, like some quarterbacks get a lot of the 1 yard touchdowns.
Right.
So it depends on what they do with the running backs. I guess they could use Brian Robinson to do that.
Yep.
But otherwise,
so just like the draft, it seemed most people agreed that Jaden Daniels and Caleb Williams were in a tier by themselves, and then it started from there. Drake May and JJ McCarthy below them. Same for fantasy.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still going to be stubborn on this and say J.J. McCarthy is a tier above Drake May. I think McCarthy is going to be playing right away. I think Drake May is going to be sitting at least at the start of the year. But look at the system. Look at the supporting cast. Who does New England have to throw the ball to? Who's playing left tackle for this football team? Is it the kid that they drafted in the 3rd round, Caden Wallace from Penn State? They just dropped Connor McDermott, I believe, right, Tucker? Did they just drop him?
I've heard it could be a Okorafor, but it's pretty much open competition right now for left tackle.
Right, and he's been a career right tackle, that guy, I think, out of Western Michigan for Pittsburgh. So that situation to me just smells like, hey, we're going to get Drake May on the field maybe next year, 2025, or very late this season. So AJ McCarthy is going to a team that has the best wide receiver in football, arguably, and Justin Jefferson, and an offensive system coming from that Shanahan tree, McVay tree. They know how to systemize offense to make it efficient for the quarterback. And J.J. McCarthy's specialty so far on a team that was 27-1, but loaded with talent is they didn't put it all on his shoulders. And I think he's going to kind of be used to the system. So the transition, I would put McCarthy a tier above Drake May, especially for 2025. I personally think it'll go beyond that as well.
I agree with that as well. I think he's a tier above.
Is there any thoughts to the offensive system in Minnesota that likes you like JJ more as far as the coordinator? And I mean, you already mentioned the talent. They have the best Justin Jefferson, the best wide receiver in football.
Yeah, for me, it's just like the talent. I mean, obviously their offense has been like, since O'Connell's been there, it's been like a top offense every year. But all the weapons they have, like Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison from last year. They also have Aaron Jones. They got for running game. They have T.J. Hawkinson. It's like their O-line is solid too. Just versus Patriots, which are more of like a kind of rebuilding their offense, and uncertainty with when May's going to play is big too.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on to wide receivers. Rookies in the draft. Obviously, we have the top 3 guys: Marvin Harrison Jr., Malik Neighbors, Rome Odunze. Some rankings I'm looking at right now have Harrison and Neighbors above Odunze, as well as above Jaden Daniels, Drake May, and JJ McCarthy. It really depends on what your team needs are, obviously, but I'll start with Dave here. As a Giants fan, are you prioritizing Neighbors over Harrison Odunze? Where are you going with this? Like, who do you really like? All things being equal, you need a wide receiver on your team. Could start this year, but definitely going to be long term. Who are you taking?
Yeah, I mean, trust me, I've been burned as a Giants fan going after Saquon Barkley for the last 4 or 5 years, and that just always seems to come back to bite me. So I kind of want to keep my favorite team bias out of this. I mean, Marvin Harrison Jr. is by far the top, in my opinion, the top rookie in Dynasty Fantasy Football, no matter what. He's the unquestioned number 1 receiver on this team. Last year, Marquise Brown, 94 targets, signs with Kansas City. Rondale Moore traded to Atlanta, 61 targets. Zach Ertz, 42 targets, got signs with Washington. They didn't do anything to replace those targets. It's all going to be in-house. They have Michael Wilson. They have Trey McBride. But Marvin Harrison not only is going to be the unquestioned number 1 on that team, but he has a much better quarterback playing for him. He's got a better offensive system, in my opinion. And the targets are just going to be off, like, just crazy. I bet Marvin Harrison ends up with the most targets of any rookie receiver in this class by, I'm going to say, at least 40 targets. He's going to get thrown. He's going to get thrown the ball so many times, and I do think he's the best player in the draft. So it's kind of like a match made in heaven. I have a number 1 pick in a dynasty league that I'm in because I came in last place, and I'm going with Marvin Harrison there. You know, I do have a couple of quarterbacks already, but I'm going Harrison all day.
All right. Tucker, what do you think about Harrison's fit in the Cardinals scheme with Michael Wilson and Trey McBride also there? Are we going to see him as a true X working the outside with McBride in the middle and Wilson as the possession receiver?
Yeah, I'd say so. It's just he's clearly far and away above the rest of the options they have. I do feel like if they had gotten if Odunze or Neighbors would have gone to Carolina, I feel like they would be the top though. Like, to me, just because of what they're going into. They're all 3 really good, obviously. But it's more just the situation, I think, in the quarterback and all that go into it. I totally agree that I think he'll get a lot more targets than the other 2 guys, just because of Odunze is going to be behind Keenan Allen and DJ Moore. And Neighbors, they kind of have a lot of receivers there, Wan'Dale Robinson and but
no clear number 1.
Right.
Yeah, no clear number 1. So I do like that one a little bit better than the Bears because of that.
Yeah. So you would agreement with what I said, that Neighbors and Harrison are both above Odunze as far as where you'd be drafting them?
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah, based off of situation and obviously the talent, that's where they went in the draft as well. But obviously, Odunze is going to have a rookie quarterback throwing to him, as well as being pretty clear the 3rd wide receiver in the depth chart right now, right? I mean, he could move up, but all right, great. All right, we got to talk about running backs, and there wasn't any exciting running backs taken early. So we got to kind of go down the rankings here a little bit. But let's start, since we're just talking about Arizona, let's start with Trey Benson. How is he going to fit Tucker into this Arizona system? And is he going to get much work? Because there's some rankings that have him as the top rookie running back right now in fantasy.
I've also seen ones where he's like tier 3. Like I was looking at somebody's and he's like 8th or something for Dynasty. But like, I don't really. I feel like he's probably one of the top ones. I mean, I like James Conner a lot, but behind him they don't really have much. They just have like DJ Dallas they brought in, but he's more a returner, and they have Michael Carter and then the undrafted Amari DiMercato from last year.
Michael Carter actually played pretty well for them last season when he got there.
Yeah, it's just the question of how many they'll keep on their roster. Kind of, they have sort of 5 guys there competing, so it's not likely they'll keep 5. Usually, it's going to be 3 or 4.
Totally, and Carter kind of does the same thing. Like he doesn't necessarily catch passes, and I feel like as a Cardinals fan, at least, they brought Trey Benson in as the pass catching running back. Am I right on that, Dave?
Yeah, he can catch the ball. I think his catch rate was over 85% in college. What I like about him the most, again, is opportunities. James Connors, he's in a contract here, I believe. Amari DiMercato was an undrafted free agent last year. I think he was second on the team in carries. Offensive coordinator Drew Pensing is from the Kevin Stefanski offensive tree back in Cleveland. So when he was with him in Minnesota and then Cleveland, they always had a 2-back system. As if your recent memory will bring you to Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt in the backfield for the Browns. And, who is going to be that number 2 guy behind James Conner? Look at the depth chart. I mean, Tucker has him already at the number 2 spot on the Cardinals depth chart on our lads. And that's it's a no-brainer to me. I think Michael Carter is more of like a gadget, third down pass catching back. And Trey Benson, I mean, the dude's 6 foot 215, ran a sub 4.40. There's 3 guys in the entire combine, all positions that did that. Not one full fumble over his career. So what are the 2 things that keep rookies off the field? A fumble and the inability to block. He didn't fumble once over his entire career, Oregon and Florida State. And he allowed just 5 pressures and 2 sacks on 86 pass block snaps. So he can do that as well. So he's going to get on the field in all situations. Connor will probably be the touchdown scorer. But if you're in a PPR where these guys getting a point per catch, Benson, I believe, is going to get, he'll average over catch and a half per game. I think you're going to see 30 catches a year from him early on. But he has like James Conner running style can lead to a lot of injuries, being nicked up, and Benson's going to be the first guy in there. So he's a safe bet on so many different angles.
I was going to say the same thing. I feel like having him, the fact that he's also insurance is huge. Connor's been pretty healthy since leaving Pittsburgh, but his running style, like you said, is pretty can be pretty damaging over time. So I agree.
He's been, knock on wood, he's been healthy, but you're right, he is a bruiser. Okay, so the rankings I'm looking at have Trey Benson over Jonathan Brooks, which surprises me because I feel like Brooks was your top running back in your rankings, right, Dave? Well as he ended up not at a good team, but with at least at a situation where he should be getting a lot of carries, right? Is there anybody else ahead of him on the depth chart, Tucker?
I think that he'll win the job, but it's kind of I kind of understand because it's somewhat murky. It's kind of just guessing, who you think will win. So some people think Chuba will win, but he just was so inefficient last year. He kind of had his chance last year and the year before, and both Miles Sanders and him were not great last year. I feel like Brooks has the most upside. So it is kind of murky though compared to these. I'd say the Cardinal situation is a lot safer.
Yeah, well, what did you like so much about Brooks coming into the league, Dave?
6.3 yards per carry, has a lot of tread left on the tires because he sat behind Bijan Robinson and Roschon Johnson, 2 NFL backs. So he really was just a playmaker for a year. So he doesn't come in beat up at all. His running style was outstanding. He was breaking. I mean, the one thing we loved about Bijan coming out of Texas was the missed tackled rate. I mean, he just never went down on initial contact, great contact balance. And Jonathan Brooks was rivaling those numbers in his first year. I think the question with him is, he will be back from his torn ACL, but he tore it in November. So is he definitely going to be ready in September? How much time on the field is he going to miss this spring? And does that set back, the simple learning of the playbook and learning pass protection? Those things worry me a little bit. And you hear coaches talk about this all the time. Can these guys get on the field and know exactly where to be and what to do when it comes to pass protection? And, Dave Canales comes from Seattle, who was under Carroll. He was the 1-year offensive coordinator this past season in Tampa Bay. He is, if you look at the offenses that he's been a part of, there's a lot of bell cow back, meaning they like to have a pure lead back. And I don't think Brooks, is going to leapfrog Hubbard early on. I do think by the end of the year, he'll be the guy. But because of the ACL, because of the lack of progression that you're going to see early on, it might just be later on in the year. But yeah, RB1 from the draft class.
And I just wanted to mention, guys, we are live. We have some people in the chat. So if you have questions, please go ahead and call them out. I'm sure Dave and Tucker will be happy to answer them. Okay, let's talk about some wide receivers who ended up in great situations. We've got Brian Thomas in Jacksonville after they traded, or they lost Calvin Ridley. We've got Xavier Worthy with the Chiefs. Obviously, that's tasty with Mahomes there. Keon Coleman ends up in Buffalo after they got rid of their wide receivers. And Ladd McConkey at the Chargers. Feels like they have a weak running back room there because they moved on from Mike Williams, as well as who am I blanking? He went to the Bears. Keenan
Allen, yeah.
Keenan Allen, yeah. So of those names that I just mentioned, anybody that is really tasty to you, or maybe someone you're down on based on situation or talent?
I'm mainly kind of looking at situation, and just I love the Bills and Chargers ones because of how much they lost. They both lost their 2 top receivers. So, and they don't have a clear. It's not like they brought in someone like a free agent that's a top receiver. They don't really have any competition. I was gonna say I think that those two are like the clear. Keon Coleman and McConkey are like in the second tier there with like neighbors below Marvin Harrison, who's in like his own league.
Oh, really? You have them up with neighbors and ahead of Odunze or below Odunze?
I think Odunze is below just because of the other options,
situation.
Yeah. I mean, if like Keenan got hurt, then obviously he looks a lot better, but it's just they have so many weapons there.
Yeah. As from a scouting perspective, those names I mentioned, Dave, what makes you most excited? Which guys?
I mean, McConkey definitely is a guy that I feel most excited about because the scouting report on him is he was ready to play in the NFL 2 years ago, just without, he can read a defense, how sharp his route running is, how quarterback friendly he is, just in terms of feeling out the defense, finding the windows, coming back to the football, and quickly getting upfield. And like you guys both said, that offensive situation, they're starving for wide receiver talent. McConkey's skill set is unlike every other receiver on that team, right? You think about Palmer, Johnston, and DJ Shark. Those guys are long striders, big possession types. Maybe they can get over the top once they get going. This is the sharp underneath mover that Justin Herbert's going to need in a lot of those like third and manageable type situations. So if there's one guy in this wide receiver class that I think can outcatch Marvin Harrison just in terms of receptions, it's definitely McConkey. And the name I think we should keep an eye on, just with a story in the news right now, is Xavier Worthy in Kansas City, because I think it sounds like Rashee Rice might be getting suspended for 8 games.
Which is insane. I can't believe that, but yeah.
One of the national reporters put that out there. It's a possibility, so don't take our word for it yet. But if that is the case, that is going to be a big deal for the fastest player to ever run a 40 at the combine with the best quarterback in football. Whether you liked Worthy or not, my only fear with him is my comp for him was Marquise Brown. The Chiefs also signed Marquise Brown.
So yeah.
Are they both going to be on the field at the same time? I think they can be. You can move both these guys around, and maybe that's what Kansas City's plan of attack will be in 2024 is just vertical speed and scare the crap out of defenses over the top. But the one name I don't love is situationally, and I also just don't think I thought he got overdrafted, was Xavier Legette in Carolina. They traded up in the first round for him at 32 overall, I believe. And, that wide receiver room, they just signed Deontay Johnson. They already have Adam Thielen. And not that Jonathan Mingo, Terrence Marshall are going to scare you, but I don't know if there's going to be a ton of targets. I also don't think he's going to get on the field very much. And I also just don't like the passing game in general there with Bryce Young yet. He hasn't proven it. So that's where I get a little fearful.
Any thoughts on so the rankings I'm looking at have him in a tier with Malachi Corey and Ricky Pearsall. Is that right where Xavier Legette should be, or
I have the same guys? In my own rankings? I have him I have Adonai Mitchell there too in that tier, but it's kind of like he could easily end up being I think that he'll end up being a starter, but yeah, it's kind of just not a great situation.
Yeah, building off those teams, the Jets and the Colts, if you watch some of the behind the scenes footage that some of these teams do an awesome job of putting out of the actual draft room for these teams, the Colts and the Jets I'm talking about, you can see how badly those teams wanted those players. The Jets were like, they were chomping at their fingernails, waiting to see if they can get Malachi Corley via trade up. When a team trades up for a guy, especially on a team with Aaron Rodgers that needs another target in the passing game, that's got to excite you a little bit too, because I think one of the issues the Jets are going to have is they want to keep Rodgers from getting hit. And what are you going to do? Sure, you build up the offensive line, but it's also get the ball out fast. Who gets the ball when you get the ball out fast? It's the slot receiver / yard after catch guys. And Malachi Corley had the most yards after catch out of anyone coming out in this class. He's a running back that plays receiver when you look at his body and his movement and his aggression. So that I actually would put Malachi Corley a tier above the guys that we mentioned earlier.
Not to mention they brought in Mike Williams, but like he has had a lot of issues staying healthy. So it wouldn't be surprising if it was like Garrett Williams and Corley are like the two leaders there.
Yep.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. So Kirk Walsh just checked in with us. About to have my first rookie draft tonight. So pumped. Congrats, man. That's going to be a lot of fun. Hopefully we're here helping you out here. All right. So we need to move on soon, but let's quickly talk. We talked quarterbacks, but we didn't get to Bo Nix, Michael Penix Jr. From a dynasty perspective, Bo Nix looks like he is going to be the starter in Denver now. So he's going to get the opportunity before Penix does. But who do you like better long term? Tucker?
It's kind of tough because you don't know how long Penix won't play. So I feel like it'll be 2 years and then he'll play. Because it's just every year you wait is losing kind of value from the rookie contract, and they're able to kind of move on after 2 years.
But if you already had like a pretty decent quarterback room on your dynasty team, and you were in the spot to pick one of them,
so if you had Kirk Cousins on your dynasty team, I would choose Michael Penix.
Oh, okay.
I feel like it goes the same way, but it depends on how much you like Bo Nix, I suppose. So especially in a reader after something like that, Bo Nix is valuable. Penix won't be drafted, probably.
Yeah. Dave, from a scouting perspective, what do you think? Just talent-wise, Penix versus Bo Nix.
I mean, talent-wise, if we're gonna take the injury risk out of this, I would go with Penix. I also like the idea of drafting a quarterback that plays over half his games every year in a dome, right? Atlanta plays in a dome. New Orleans is in the dome. They play a lot of good weather games in that division. But if I'm if I want to go to like a fantasy type format, Bo Nix, being under Sean Payton, I like that. I think Sean Payton is one of the best offensive minds in football. But early payback, I mean, no matter what, he's going to give you more than Penix. I mean, Penix is just too risky for me for two reasons. I have no idea when he's going to get on the field. And B, his game is volatile. And C, that injury scare, like that really bumped him down our lad stacks. And there's no secrets how fragile he is. And I did talk to a few guys that interviewed with him from teams. And the feedback was, I've never seen someone so frail looking, so skinny looking, right? I don't know if that works in the NFL. We still don't know if he can hold up. I know everyone likes to say his last 2 years, he didn't miss a game, but I combat that with he didn't get touched either. I mean, he was one of the least touched quarterbacks in this entire draft class over the past 2 years.
All right, we got a question from Kirk here. We'll get to, and then we'll move on. Question for you guys. What's the most number of spots you think someone should rise or fall based on landing spot and draft capital compared to my pre-draft rankings? Okay, so he is looking at pre-draft, meaning pre-NFL draft, and then how you figure in the landing spots, which we were just talking about. So, Tucker, I'll let you take that one first. What are you thinking?
So is that's saying like the maximum number, like how much change there should be due to where they get
Yeah,
drafted?
how many spots does someone move based on landing spot?
I feel like
So
it could be, any number. I think you should just completely
yeah,
redo the rankings because like that's everything to me, anyways. Like there's so much you can't really account for. So yeah, that's my answer.
yeah, I would agree with that. It's Dave. Anything different?
Yeah, pre-draft rankings, especially when you're talking about rookies, I just don't think it's really that relevant. I mean, you could kind of have like a footnote under it, but it's situation or bust with me in fantasy. And if you're looking for an objective answer, how many rounds can someone move in that stance? I think it comes down to how many points per week do you get to project these guys, and that if it's more than 2, 3, 4 points per week based on that situation, I think it moves you up at least a round, maybe even 2.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to looking at our depth charts on our lads. We've got the expert Tucker, Duke of depth charts, Moss here to walk us through some good situations where we can see some other players stepping up, getting opportunities that they haven't gotten in the past. What's the first team you're looking at in depth charts, Tucker, that we think we can see some fantasy opportunity at?
Is this for rookies or for anybody?
This could be for anybody. We're off rookies now. This could be for anybody, but it could be a rookie that's stepping into a position that you really like.
Yeah, so I mean, the easy ones are like we've already basically talked about for the rookies. So like the Cardinals with Marvin Harrison, and the Bills that I like a lot with Keon Coleman, and the Chargers with Ladd McConkey. There's some situations I like with other rookies as like the number 3 wide receivers, so like Malachi Corley there with the Jets. I like the Jalen McMillan on the Bucks could end up winning their number 3 spot. He just has to compete with Trey Palmer there. Obviously, they have 2 top guys though in Mike Evans and Godwin. I like Luke McCaffrey too for Washington, especially if they're going to be airing it out as much as Dave thinks, and I agree with that. I think that he could be really good value. He'll just compete with Zacchaeus for probably that slot role. As for, I'll have to look into veterans, but those are like my kind of rookies I like to look at because of the opportunity.
Any running backs walking into a good situation that you really like in the depth charts?
This for like not really free agents, or not really rookies, but free agents. I mean, like Aaron Jones is obviously good. Josh Jacobs, they're both just becoming the kind of top clear-cut running back. Derrick Henry is really good one. I think he's being undervalued in like I was looking at.
Yeah, he did kind of slow down a little bit at the end of last year, but maybe he gets a jetpack being on a good team, actually one that can compete for a Super Bowl.
Yeah, I think he'll look a lot better on the Ravens than the Titans. I think I was looking at like the redraft rankings, and I like him a lot as value. He's like 48th or something in half PPR or for Superflex.
Yeah.
What other running back moves were there that were big? I mean, like Eckler's kind of slowing down. I don't know if I really love the backfield.
Yeah, that's interesting because Eckler's pretty far down the rankings for someone who could be a number 1 RB in Washington, but he will be splitting carries with Brian Robinson Jr.
Yeah, I'd assume so. I like Bucky Irving for the Bucks could be good too behind Rachaad White.
Yeah, but they also have Chase Edmonds there. So how are we feeling about that? Like, because Bucky and Chase and White all kind of feel like similar running backs, guys that can catch passes. I don't know, Dave. What are you thinking there? I mean, you liked Bucky a lot coming into the draft.
Yeah, I mean, he led the nation's running backs in receptions last year, and it even goes beyond the numbers, just how easily he brings the ball in. He's got oversized hands for his frame. Sometimes you see these small guys, and you're a little bit worried about hand size and ability to see the ball in. But what they're going to be really drawn to is what he can do after the catch. He's so shifty, and if you get him into space, he's one of the most dangerous backs in the class. The reason why he doesn't get drafted higher, he's under 200 pounds. That just doesn't happen often. You're 192 pounds. You're not going to get drafted high unless you have a special trait. But the special trait in his game is the ability to evade tacklers in space. You see a small guy like that, you don't expect to see a lot after contact, but his yards after contact are big number. And it's not because of power, it's because of contact balance. And when he's in space, like he's the kind of guy, he's just hard to touch, let alone take down to the ground. So the fact that you could put him into a very specific role, kind of what the Patriots used to do with like James White and Deion Lewis. I mean, that kind of skill set in the right system can be really dangerous.
There's
go ahead.
For like rookies, there is like two situations I kind of want to talk about. Is just they're kind of tricky for fantasy, but they could be very profitable though. The Dolphins getting Jalen Wright like could end up having good value. It's just that they have so many running backs there, in Devin Achane and Raheem Mostert. And then, what do you think about Jalen Wright, Dave?
Such a Miami Dolphin, fastest running back in the class. Of course he goes to Miami, right? I mean, they don't have enough speed on that team, right? Mm-hmm. So to me, he comes from that Shanahan system where they just want to keep pumping new running backs into the system because they know it's a volatile position. They know it's a high injury position. If these guys stay healthy in front of him, I don't think you're going to hear his name all year. So to me, he's a stash kind of guy. Like if one of these guys gets hurt, I'm going to look stupid because he's going to go off because he's going to get the looks in one of the most running back friendly offenses in the NFL. So if you take him, I would actually love to take him as a safety net. So if I wind up with Mostert or Achane, I'm going to draft him late in the draft just in case one of those guys goes down. He's my handicap. He's my security blanket just in case. And you should feel, you sleep better at night if one of these guys goes down.
Yeah. That's the problem with the Dolphins. Like last year, it was all three of their running backs, Jeff Wilson, Achane, and Mostert, were all drafted like right next to each other.
Yeah.
Because it's just like, it's kind of just dependent on who gets hurt and who ends up,
right. I mean, what Achane did last year was special. Like,
it was spectacular. He was really fun to watch.
Borderline unbelievable. It's so year two. It did seem like some teams' defenses started to catch up onto what Miami was actually doing on offense, because this is one of the disadvantages of having one less preseason game is that these teams kind of enter 8 weeks, 1, 2, 3, 4, still trying to figure out what they're doing on defense. And you run into an offense that was just clicking on all cylinders as fast as Miami. Remember that game against Denver? I mean, that was they scored 70 points that game. Like they didn't know what to do. And now you look at late in the year, Miami did get slowed down. But Achane, that speed is as dangerous as it gets, and he's a guy that he can actually play running back as well. He's not just a speed guy. So, but that's going to be a fun situation to watch. They even have a couple backup wide receivers that I'm looking forward to seeing into that system.
All right, we're going to take a moment and welcome in a guest. We have a surprise guest, Adam Pelletier from the Sports Gambling Podcast Network. Also does a lot with fantasy for Sports Gambling Podcast Network. You can introduce yourself. What do people need to know about you, Adam?
That I strongly disagree with this Devin Achane love happening here.
Oh, no.
Yes. Because we're talking about a
guy
right
out of the gate, throwing
right out of the gate. No, we're not. No pleasantries. We're just right into it right now. Okay,
love it.
But we're talking about a guy who, in 11 games this year, only had 4 where he went for more than 100, and barely broke 50 2 other times. And outside of those first 4 weeks, he was average. He was an average running back, and he got completely bottled up down the stretch as soon as they got into the tougher part of their schedule. This is a Miami team that I've been on is fraudulent. It's incredibly fraudulent offensive. It's sugar high numbers, and everybody thinks of it from that Denver game. A 70-point game does a lot for your year-long stats. And the thing is as they got into the meat of their schedule and as they went down the stretch, they got beat up by better teams. Well, I think they beat one playoff team. If they beat Dallas, and that was it. One win against playoff teams in the entire season doesn't give me any sort of confidence in this team as an offensive unit. You're going to get the numbers from Tyreek Hill. You're going to get some games from Tua, but this is a team that you really want to avoid because they struggled offensively in the second half of the year, like you guys said, once teams figured out what they were doing, and they're going to be playing a second place schedule this year. And that's going to really set them back as well. So
you're off all Dolphins, or is there any?
I'm not in on them.
Would you draft Jalen Wright late as a potential if he's?
Of course. I mean, you have to, but you're not drafting any of these guys as a guy that you're, other than Tyreek Hill, that you're going to start week in and week out. These are guys that you need to be cautious of. And even then, you have to watch them against good defenses. I mean, you can't count on a guy like you can't count on Tua right now to give you that consistent production week in and week out, because he's so dependent upon those few monster games. He's going to let you down in the late season.
Yeah. And I know we're talking fantasy here, but I just have to bring it up since it's a newer news story. Odell Beckham Jr. signed with the Dolphins. Tucker already has him on the Miami depth chart. You have him towards the top of the depth chart, Tucker. What are you just thinking on what Odell is going to do here in Miami?
Yeah, I mean, he's certainly not in his prime anymore, but I feel like he's clearly more talented than their second string receivers. I mean, it's River Craycraft, Braxton Berrios, Eric Ezukanma. I agree with it. I think Dave was going to mention like Malik Washington. I was kind of excited to see if he could win a starting job over Berrios, but I mean, we'll see what happens. But yeah, I feel like he's clearly like going to be the third starter opening week.
Yeah. We were talking depth charts and potential opportunities that we might be able to glean from it, Adam. Any thoughts on teams where you really liked somebody who landed there, whether they be a rookie or a free agent or a trade? Any depth charts do you see opportunity in?
I mean, if you're talking about the AFC, you got to go right to the top of the AFC with the Bills and Chiefs. Both of them, I don't know if y'all already talked about this, and I apologize if you
we talked a little bit about Keon Coleman at the Bills, but you're a Bills guy, so let's hear it.
I mean, Keon Coleman's great, but the guys you're actually going to find are going to be the value late in your drafts are going to be the Quintez Cephas's, the Chase Claypools. Those are where you're going to find value, because I don't think Mac Hollins is going to keep his role on this roster. Mac Hollins feels like he's actually going to be kind of like camp depth, because Chase Claypool is a guy who's massively physically talented. He's everything we were told that Gabe Davis could be, and he's fast. And that the same thing goes for Quintez Cephas, except he's a better route runner. So they said, we liked Gabe Davis, but we need guys who can do these things. And Quintez Cephas is an underrated route runner. You know, he's a guy who goes up and gets the ball. He's a physical receiver. He's only 6'1", but he plays bigger than his size. And those are guys who are going to be really interesting to me. The depth receivers in Buffalo are guys you need to be looking at. You need to be keeping an eye on KJ Hamler as well, because he's a guy who has the speed and can show open quickly, which the Bills offense hasn't had since Stephon Diggs fell off a cliff at the start of last year. So that's just really important to remember, that this Bills offense is going to be unsettled, and you're going to have a chance to pick up some flex plays in your later rounds or in your best ball drafts who are going to be nice. Because if Quintez Cephas makes the roster, he's going to have a 2-touchdown game. He played great with Jared Goff, and Josh Allen is 3 times the quarterback Jared Goff is.
I totally agree with the Mac Hollins. Like, I can totally see him not end up making the roster. He got beat out by Van Jefferson last year when the Falcons brought him in. I was going to ask, do you have any thoughts on Justin Shorter?
I mean, Justin Shorter's in that same vein. It's very clear that Buffalo wanted to go out and get a big physical receiver. They went and got Cephas. They went and got Claypool. They had Justin Shorter, who spent all last year on IR. So you have 3 guys who are on that bigger, more physical mold. They're looking for that guy. So I don't know what their projection on Keon Coleman is if he's just Gabe Davis with maybe a little bit better route tree, or if he's just going to be Gabe Davis, but just faster. And so that's kind of where we're going to know more once we get into training camp. And even then, you want to avoid Keon Coleman, because one thing we know about Brandon Beane is he does not trust rookies. Keon Coleman probably won't be a week 1 starter. Just keep that in mind. He probably won't start week 1. He'll work his way onto the field later. And, you know, and that's something where the Bills have been at fault when you compare them to a team like the Kansas City Chiefs. The Chiefs will put Xavier Worthy out there in week 1, and they're going to let Xavier Worthy suck through about half the games this season. They do it. It's what they do year in and year out with their young receivers. They put them out there and they're like, this guy's going to suck for half the year. But when we get to the playoffs, he's going to be ready. He's going to be ready, and he's going to be able to do more. And that's one of the reasons why, like, it pains me to say, it's why the Chiefs have had an edge on the Bills, is because they're more willing to put their rookies in positions to fail early, and the Bills are not. The Bills have a smaller margin for error than the Chiefs because they don't have Andy Reid calling plays. And that is time and time again becoming clear that is the difference between these two squads.
Wow, what about Khalil Shakir? Well is Khalil Shakir really worth going after? Because he's probably the safest receiver that Allen's going to have.
You want to see where this is going to play out, because Khalil Shakir was the guy dominating targets down the stretch for the Bills last year. He was the most targeted player, and it's just going to depend on where his value is. If he sneaks into like the top 5 rounds, I'm not interested in him because he's going to have too many weeks where he's not going to live up to that. If he's round 6 or later, I really like that because I think he's going to be second on this team in targets behind Kincaid and second in touches behind James Cook. This feels like James Cook's team now. And it feels like the Bills have become a run first, run often team, but with an explosive quarterback. So they're just able to keep you. They're multiple now. Something that they've talked about is they want to be multiple, but out of the same look. So you're going to see a lot of two tight. You're going to see Dawson Knox and Kincaid on the field at the same time. You're going to see 2 receivers, and you're going to see James Cook, and they're going to beat you up that way because they have guys who can win in a multitude of ways.
Yeah. Since we're talking about the Bills, would love, and you already mentioned James Cook, would love to hear your thoughts on Ray Davis as a, you know, I feel like there's a lot of touches in Buffalo now that he's going to be getting.
There's some touches in Buffalo. I think you're still going to see James Cook get the value touches because James Cook has proved he can find the hole. He can get into the end zone. Because there's really only about 100 touches that weren't James Cook touches, or 100 rushes that weren't James Cook rushes last year for the running backs that went to Johnson and Latavius Murray. So there's some work, but there's not a ton. And really, they're bringing in Ray Davis so that way you don't have to run Josh Allen QB power and QB sneak on 4th and 1 and 4th and goal in week 1. You save that play for the end of the season. And that's what this is about. The Bills are at a point where they need to save their players. You know, they have a good handle on the AFC East still. You know, they're going to be the contender. They're going to be the top dog there. And they're just making sure that they're gearing up. They have to beat the Chiefs. They were one Stephon Diggs catch away from beating the Chiefs last year. And so for a team that's just been so close, this is a little bit of a rebuild year for them where they're going to take a step back. And there's going to be a lot of questions. So you can't overdraft any Bills right now other than Josh Allen and James Cook. Other than that, I'm waiting until the later rounds across the board, probably even on Kincaid, because I think they know this is a rebuild year. They need to get off the Von Miller contract. They need to get out of the cap hell that Trey White created. And you have to reset this roster and build it for the future. It's why they traded back in the draft. They're trying to accumulate those young assets that are so key to a team that has expensive building blocks like Josh Allen.
Yeah. Well, that's really well said. And I wanted to just point out, check out our lads depth charts because we've got all the updated depth charts.
I have been the biggest fan of our lads forever. Let me tell you, everyone's like, depth charts, where do you go? I'm like, I go to our lads. 10 out of 10. And this isn't just because I'm on your show. I would tell that to anybody anytime. I live off of our lads.
Yeah,
I love it. And I think y'all are the most accurate about positioning and usage. And that's just spectacular. It's great. You know, every show I've got one tab that's our lads and one tab that's Pro Football Reference for the stats, just working back and forth the entire show.
Nice.
Well, that's great to know. That's great to know. And this is Tucker, our Duke of Depth Charts, who updates that. So you've met the man behind the machine.
I get a lot of input
there because of you.
That's awesome. I get a lot of input on those. So if you ever see something you think is inaccurate or anything like that, just send an email to proscoutdan@aol.com or tucker.moss@ourlads.com.
For sure.
All right, let's move on to the final segment that I had planned. We're going to talk fantasy football tiers for running backs. Yeah, I've got some. I'm looking at Fantasy Pros right now, just kind of based off of their tiers that they have the top running backs in. They have Christian McCaffrey, Brees Hall, Bijan Robinson, Jonathan Taylor. Any quibbles there with that top tier? I'll start with Tucker.
I have a I kind of question the Jets situation just because of the two additional running backs they brought in. I mean, it could just be depth, because that room was kind of shallow. But Dave, do you have any thoughts on Braylon Allen or Isaiah Davis on the Jets?
I don't think they're going to touch. I don't think they're going to touch Brees Hall's production. The fear I have of Brees Hall's production and just security is it's all going to be about Aaron Rodgers keeping him upright, keeping him healthy. Because the second he goes down, even though Tyrod Taylor does provide a little bit more secure quarterback play than Zach Wilson did last year, if he were to go down, I got burned last year on the Jets. I went long on Brees Hall, Garrett Wilson, all these guys, and the second that quarterback goes down, I do think he's going to be a fragile quarterback in general. Still not positive they fixed the offensive line issues. So that kind of, again, situationally, I don't love where the Jets are with Brees Hall. Love him as a tier 2 guy, but I agree with you. That's the name that kind of sticks out to me. That just doesn't belong with those other guys.
You agree with that, Adam?
Brees Hall and Jonathan Taylor both give me pause heading into this year. I just think that we saw the Colts last year really, steered in. They saw Zach Moss was really good. And, Jonathan Taylor, and that makes me think that it's a scheme thing. So that means it's a plug and play. Some of these teams, you can plug in any running back and it's going to work. We think of the Shanahan system. Additionally, Anthony Richardson is back, and that's going to cut into that workload that Jonathan Taylor had last year. And he,
if Richardson can stay healthy.
If he can stay healthy,
of course. That's a big if, yeah.
It's probably not as big of an if. He came back, bulked up, but the guy that you're liking there coming off injury is Brees Hall. But like even Jonathan Taylor last year, only about 700 yards across 10 games. So that's tough to see. And you really want to just, the only guy that I feel comfortable putting in that top tier where I'm like, I want that guy is Christian McCaffrey. Everybody else is question marks. Even Bijan Robinson is question marks. Now I'm pretty sure he's going to be a lot better because Kirk Cousins is great for your receiving backs, but I still don't know. To me, it's Christian McCaffrey at the top tier by himself. And that next group of guys combines with like Jahmyr Gibbs and ETN and James Cook to form kind of like a clear tier 2 below that. But the only guy that I'm taking before some of the receivers is Christian McCaffrey.
All right. Let's talk a little bit about that tier 2 then. I agree. Christian McCaffrey could be in a tier by himself. And then Brees Hall, Robinson, and Jonathan Taylor can be worked in with like Gibbs, ETN, as you already said, Derrick Henry, Kyron Williams, and Saquon Barkley. Anybody you disagree with in that tier 2 that I just said?
Was that me?
Dave. I'll start with Dave.
I would say Kyron Williams scares me a little bit just from a sheer talent perspective. I think he's a product of the system, just like I think Puka Nacua. That production that we saw had much more to do with where he was, the role he was in, the quarterback he was playing with. I don't want to take anything away from him, but the talent there scares me with Kyron Williams, and the fact that they got Blake Corum into that backfield. That's a guy you would not be surprised at all to see Corum as RB1 on that team before the end of the year. Similar skill sets. I think Corum's going to take a lot of the goal line action away from Kyron Williams. I do think he has the potential to be a 10 touchdown guy as a rookie because that's where he excels the best. Blake Corum's best tape is in short windows, 3rd and 1, 4th and goal, those side of situations. He has great feel for where the defense is. He knows how to make himself small. He runs with tremendous power and late quickness. That is, to me, that's the best version of a short yardage back. It's not the big boys like Derrick Henry. It's the guys that can shift and play strong and low to the ground and just adjust at the last second. So Kyron Williams, great player. Loved him coming out. Rams got a great deal there. I think he was a 6th rounder, right? But Blake Corum's going to come in and steal some of that production away from him.
All right. So you're going to hold off and get Blake Corum late. And hopefully he steps into the number 1 role. Adam, what are you thinking with those other names I just read?
I think that second tier is bigger than people want to admit it is right now because you have a big group of guys where you have, Brees Hall coming off of injury, Jonathan Taylor coming off his injury, Bijan Robinson in a new system, but we think that's going to be good for him. It should be good for him, but it has to give you pause. A guy, I really think a guy like Isaiah Pacheco belongs in that tier, because we saw last year that when Isaiah Pacheco's off the field and unavailable, that Chiefs team transforms into a worse version of itself. We have Isaiah Pacheco, who's just a violent, fierce runner. He's not a big guy, but he runs hard. He keeps driving, and he has that short area quickness that you talked about earlier, where he can make a guy miss when he steps into the hole. And that's huge. And I think I'm dropping guys like Joe Mixon down because, the Bengals let him go for a reason. A good running game is going to help Joe Burrow. A reliable pass protector is going to help Joe Burrow. And he's now in Texas, and now he's in Houston, and Houston's kind of building, the all-time 2021 team right now with Joe Mixon and Stephon Diggs, thinking that they're going to build, and that's going to be good for that. That's going to be really good for that team. It's not going to be good for those guys' fantasy outlook.
How close is somebody like James Cook and Josh Jacobs to tier 2?
I think those guys, James Cook is clearly in tier 2. Josh Jacobs, I'm less convinced on, just because the Raiders are a team in transition right now. They didn't necessarily want to keep their coach. The front office didn't want to keep their coach. The players wanted to keep their coach, and it feels like that's why they kept their coach. And just, a guy like that. And then you have, oh no, Josh Jacobs isn't on the Raiders anymore. Good Lord. It's been a year, y'all. It's been a year.
All the running
backs. We're talking about the Packers.
Yeah, we're talking about the Packers. That's right. I mean, the Packers want to be a throw first team. I mean, they're committed to Jordan Love. You can say you brought in Josh Jacobs, but you also drafted a rookie in Marshawn Lloyd, who's, you don't draft a rookie back if you're really happy with Josh Jacobs. And they had one of the youngest receiving cores in the NFL last year, and all those receivers produced. You're gonna look to get those receivers more work and keep them involved, because you're not going to be a run first team the way they're built. They're built to throw the ball. Actually, they're a sneaky throwing team. They're a sneaky aerial attack.
What's interesting about Jacobs on the Packers is that he signed a 4-year contract with them, but he has an out after 1 year. So if they really love Lloyd after just 1 year, they could just let Jacobs walk and have no little cap punishment for that.
All right, good to know.
And that was a team last year that struggled to run the ball. I mean, both their backs combined for about 1,200 yards between Dillon and Aaron Jones on the ground. They really weren't good at running the ball, and I don't think Josh Jacobs is going to make them any better, because Josh Jacobs is a volume kind of guy, and some of his fantasy production is from the receiving game. So I'm not necessarily super excited about Josh Jacobs from a fantasy standpoint in Green Bay, and I don't even think he's going to make that big of a difference for the team as a whole, because I don't think he's that much of an upgrade over Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon. I think it's a line issue there.
I was going to say, I think that Rachaad White should be in the second tier. I like him. My main question is,
we're getting a big second tier here.
I mean, that's today's NFL, though. I mean, you have these teams that have multiple backs. You're going to have multiple guys getting involved in specialty ways, and you have the Rachaad Whites of the world. You have the Tony Pollards, even. You have the Raheem Mosterts. It's just in your personal rankings. And your decision making, you have to think about, where do I think I'm out of consistency and into question marks. And so that's just kind of it. We're talking in a broad consensus tier. The consensus second tier is going to be massive. If I'm making a decision on my own, I'm going to cut it somewhere. And in my second tier, I'm looking at consistency over upside. Those guys who are high upside, but I worry about their floor, that's a third tier for me.
Got it. All right. Let's wrap up with just throwing out some sleeper names that you guys like. Just some players that you're excited about, players that you find yourself drafting and maybe mocks. Let's start with Tucker. Do you have any names you want to throw out that you haven't already mentioned?
Yeah, a lot of people like this the Charger situation with Kamani Vital in the 6th round, just because of they're allegedly going to focus pretty hard on running the ball, and I believe them. Then they have Dobbins and Gus Edwards ahead of him, and obviously Dobbins hasn't really been able to stay healthy throughout the last several years, and so he could easily get a lot of touches through the year, at least later on in the year. He's probably one of my favorite later round round draft picks. And
right.
The Raiders, Dylan Laub, I don't know how to say his name.
Lobby, yeah.
That could be a good one too if he beats Amir Abdullah for that third down role.
Yeah, he should catch a lot of passes. That was somebody that Dave liked a lot coming into the draft. Not necessarily the top 5 running back, but as a sleeper, that was one that you named. Dave, you already mentioned Blake Corum potentially getting the starting role at some point in Los Angeles, but any other names or have anything else about Lobby?
Yeah, I mean, Lobby he could be a wide receiver. His route running is so good that he did play some slot receiver at the Senior Bowl in Mobile, and he was one of the best route runners there, really soft hands. A non-rookie I like just because of what Dallas did not do in the draft, and I don't think Ezekiel Elliott is going to be the Ezekiel Elliott of old. I'm looking at Rico Dowdle in an offense that is going to be high scoring, high powered. Can they get it done in January? We'll see, but that's not really relevant to what we're talking about. And I know Tony Pollard didn't have the year that we thought he would last year, but I still think there's value in whoever has that number 1 job in Dallas. So that's a guy that I like among the rookies. And I want to keep an eye. I'm not all in on Josh Jacobs as a fit for Green Bay either. And I'm just going to kind of stash Marshawn Lloyd. I think he's a guy that can be a much better pro and a much better fit for that offensive scheme with how often they want to get lateral. And Marshawn Lloyd has as much get off and as much speed as any of these rookie backs. So I like that situation a lot. And the last one I would say, I do like Ray Davis in Buffalo. I do think James Cook belongs that, but if they are going to kind of commit to the run more, I can't see James Cook getting 20 plus carries per game at 200 pounds. It just doesn't happen in the NFL. So someone else is going to get those carries. And Ray Davis, he did get a lot of carries, a little bit banged up, but this guy is a 217-pound wrecking ball. And his tape against Florida last year, I still say to this day in the pre-draft process, was the most impressive running back tape I saw in a single game all year. So that's just something that I think that is a guy to keep an eye on, especially if you do end up with James Cook. Get this guy in your roster as well.
All right. Well, those are some great names. Any other names we didn't mention, Adam, or that you're disagreeing with any of those?
No, I'm not disagreeing with any of those. Again, I think Davis is going to be a contributor for Buffalo. I just think they want to get James Cook more involved. I really do. It just depends on how much they're going to pace him. And they want to get him more involved in the passing game because the Bills were also a couple James Cook drops away from a lot more wins last year, including in the playoffs. That playoff game just had so many misses for the Bills, from kicker to receiver to running back and coaching, of course. But, we'll leave that for another day. But if we're talking about running backs that we're thinking about, Zach Moss is currently ranked as the 32nd best running back, according to Fantasy Pros. That's criminally low for a guy who's stepping into a role where the previous lead back had 300 touches and no other back had more than 100. Zach Moss proved last year that in the right scheme, he can be the guy. Now, I don't know how he's going to do going from the Indy scheme, which has proven very running back friendly, into Cincinnati, which is less. Because I know when he's in Buffalo, he was bad. Zach Moss couldn't find a hole. The only thing he could find was his lineman's backside. I watched plenty of Zach Moss games where Zach Moss has a hole and all he needs to do is hit it and he's got 7 yards and he runs right into the back of the center. And so if he's cleaned that up and he gets the work in that Cincinnati backfield, we're looking at a guy who might not get to that 300 number, but he's going to get 200, 250 touches, which is great for a running back, and is going to put him just on the fringe of that RB1 territory. If he's RB32, that means you're getting him in the double-digit rounds. That's a guy you have to be in on. That's a guy you need to go and get. Be comfortable going for him in round 8 in your drafts. He's going to be a guy that's going to give you a lot of value, because the Bengals are going to try to keep taking pressure off Joe Burrow because they put a big investment in Joe Burrow, and we don't know what's going to happen. T. Higgins is not happy in Cincinnati right now, so they could move him, which then makes Joe Burrow's life harder. When you go from having had 2 all-pro caliber receivers to now just 1, your life gets harder as a quarterback, So I like Zach Moss this year in Cincinnati, especially at that price point, and I like him a lot better than guys like Jalen Warren, Devin Singletary, and Javonte Williams, who are all going ahead of him. I think Zach Moss has a clearer path to heavy volume that those guys don't. I mean, Devin Singletary, and Jalen Warren are looking at timeshares with guys.
Yeah. Oh, that's a really good one. I like that. I'm going to be targeting Zach Moss in some drafts coming up then. All right. So thank you everybody for watching.
A week before all of his drafts and ask me who he should draft. That's usually how this goes.
That's exactly how. And guess what? I am a pretty good fantasy player thanks to you. All right. Well, thanks so much. I've been Ryan McKee. You can follow me at the Ryan McKee on Twitter. We'll make sure to subscribe to our lads channel. We'll be doing a lot more of these live streams, and so turn on your notifications so you know when they're coming. We'll get a more consistent schedule soon. Follow Dave at ourlads_Psy on Twitter. Anything else you want to throw out there, Dave?
No, that was
you're working on, you're excited about?
That was a lot of fun. I always like to, I'm so all in on draft prep and scouting, and it's like a 12-month process. And I like to sit back and just listen to these guys and hear the different perspective. And so thanks to these guys, the depth chart expert and the fantasy expert. It's really fun to listen to you guys. So thanks for coming on.
You definitely check out Adam Pelletier at Adam Pelletier on Twitter. He is also a sports gambling podcast network. What is your official role there now?
I'm the managing editor. Anything that's broken, I end up fixing or just making sure everything runs on time. That's kind of my job right now.
So check out Adam's work at sportsgamblingpodcast.com as well as, are you on any other podcasts or anything right now that we should know about?
Nope. Just
Nothing.
Just that.
All right. And Tucker, you're still off social media.
That's right. Yep.
Tucker is just keeps his head low and does the depth charts. So check out our lads depth charts for Tucker's work. And if you want, you can send him an email, tucker.moss at ourlads.com, and you can try to talk him into joining social media so we can all see what his life is behind the scenes, because we're all really interested in the do good depth charts. So
don't join Tucker. It's a cesspool. It's an absolute cesspool. Don't put yourself out. It really will. Don't get in on that.
All right. Well, I guess Tucker's not going to be on social media then. All right. Thanks everybody for watching. We're going to get out of here.